Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched Shazam, Fury of the Gods. Let's talk about it. So Shazam, Fury of the Gods is directed by David F. Sandberg, who also directed the first Shazam movie, which I was a really big fan of. This was one of the first movie reviews that I did on my channel, I believe, and yeah, it has a very special place in my heart for that reason, but also because I was a really big fan of the first Shazam movie. I felt like it was very fun, but it still had heart to it. It still had that really amazing through line about, you know, Billy Batson belonging to this foster family. It's something that's really underrepresented in media, and the fact that this franchise decided to highlight that was really special and really endearing. And I also really liked the characters of Billy Batson and Freddie and his foster siblings. And then of course you had Zachary Levi's Shazam, you know, this kind of superhero manifestation that Billy has when he says the magic word. And he was also very charming and charismatic in the first film. I mean, we've come to know a little bit more about Zachary Levi since then, which is unfortunate. I also loved David F. Sandberg incorporating the kind of horror elements into that first movie with like the monsters and the 7 deadly sins. I'll always remember that boardroom scene where he doesn't even show the violence that takes place with the monsters, but rather he has that like translucent screen where you infer what's going on and you hear the screaming and everything with the board members. That was such an excellent scene from that first movie, and I just really liked how he incorporated his horror background into this superhero movie in a similar way that James Wan did with Aquaman. But despite the fact that I really liked the first movie, going into the second one, unfortunately I was a little bit apprehensive. A lot has happened since that first movie came out, to be fair. I mean, we've had a whole Black Adam movie, and Black Adam is supposed to be the villain or anti-hero in the Shazam universe, but Black Adam is being portrayed by Dwayne Johnson in the DCEU, and he decided that the Shazam world is too small of a pool for him to play in, so he decided to kind of start his own thing as Black Adam, leaving Shazam behind. And I think it really affected the sequel. It made it feel like less of a big deal, less of a main event than it could have been had Black Adam been the villain or anti-hero for Shazam as planned. And then of course you have the whole James Gunn of it all, which definitely took out a lot of excitement for the Shazam sequel, because we already knew as fans that a lot of what was going to happen in this sequel would have very few consequences in the direction of the brand new DCU, because Gunn has kind of done this soft reboot. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't really feel consequential. It doesn't really feel necessary or important or needed, and that definitely hindered the film going into it. But still, I was ready to have a good time with this movie regardless and just enjoy it for what it is, even if it doesn't have major connections to the wider DCU going forward. But even then, I have to say, I didn't love this movie, I'm afraid. I really didn't. I saw the Rotten Tomatoes score and I thought, how bad can it be? What's going on? And we'll talk about my thoughts on the direction of superhero movies later on, but it's not looking great. With entries like this, we're not having a good time. Now here's the thing, this movie isn't the worst movie in the world. We'll start off with the positives, right? Because I know that people have been coming out saying that they really enjoyed this movie. I think it's almost defensive, the way that people have been, you know, backing this film, and saying, you know, it deserves a good shot, and the fact that it's doing so poorly at the box office also has people riled up. So I want to start off with the positives. I do think that the Shazam family is really charming and really charismatic, and I do like them. I like I said, the unique aspect of them being a foster family, and also the fact that Billy was so giving and so selfless that he gave his foster siblings the power of Shazam. Like, he shared it all around, and so now you have this like team dynamic within the family where there are a team of superheroes that are actually kids trying to figure things out. I really like the premise and the idea of that story, because it gives him that unique angle in this superhero landscape of being selfless enough to share the powers that he was gifted. I also really like the Shazam franchise's use of mythology, especially Greco-Roman mythology. You guys know I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of Greco-Roman myth, okay? And one of the biggest, questions I've always had is, why doesn't Hollywood do more with Greco-Roman myth? I mean, it's just an endless pool of content that you can mine from. I don't understand why they misuse it. I mean, they tried with Percy Jackson, which I loved. The first Percy Jackson movie, loved it, okay, because I'm such a huge fan of Greco-Roman myth. Second one though, even I can excuse that monstrosity, okay? But I enjoy the fact that the Shazam films dive into Greco-Roman myth. I mean, here we have the three daughters of Atlas being explored here, and they're playing around with the myth a little bit, as comic books tend to do, but I really like the idea of these gods coming and having beef with humans. These human superheroes fighting against the gods. Like, that to me is a compelling storyline. Now, I did have some issues with the execution of the storyline, but we're talking about the positives for now. We're talking about the positives for now, so I did enjoy the idea in theory. And then next up, what's another thing that I liked? I like the family feel, like it's a family movie. I don't think every single superhero movie has to be made for 35-year-old men. Like, I truly do think it's important to have a variety in tone when it comes to these superhero movies, and Shazam definitely skews younger. But I think it's a really fun, family-friendly movie that has its moments. And it also has some good jokes here and there. I wouldn't say all of the jokes landed for me, but there were times where I chuckled. I had a nice little chuckle. Okay, especially the Skittles ad. The Skittles ad in the middle of this film is quite honestly some of the best product placement I've ever seen in my life. When that little girl gets out a pack of Skittles to summon the demonic unicorn, I kind of lived. Okay, the Taste the Rainbow, like that was pretty good. I don't know how much Skittles paid for that product placement, but it was money well spent. So okay, now that I've dived into the parts of the film that I enjoyed, and again, some positivity there, please keep that in mind, before we move on to the stuff that I wasn't so much of a fan of, overall there was quite a bit. Of this film that I just did not care for. The thing is that this film is not terrible. It's not egregiously bad. Overall, it's pretty inoffensive. But that's the problem that I have with it, is that it kind of falls in this category of just sheer midness, sheer mehness, that it's kind of frustrating, especially because we are coming off of a film like Ant-Man, which was also mid and also meh. I feel like seeing this string of mid-meh superhero movies is making me sweat a little bit as a fan of this genre, and I think that's why I'm even more frustrated with Shazam 2 than I would have been otherwise. Like, if I'd come off of Avengers Endgame, like, it would have been fine. I'd be like, oh, this is a meh film, but it's not the end of the world. Like, that's how I felt with Ant-Man 2. But now we're at Ant-Man 3, and it's a bit more of an emergency than it once was. Okay, so let me dive into the actual issues that I had with this movie. Starting off with the story, the writing. This is a very poorly written script. Guys, I don't know what's going on in Hollywood when it comes to writers. I know that, there are talks of strikes happening, and, issues with pay, and that's very valid, very fair. People should be paid fairly for their work, duh. But the writing in these franchise films has just fallen off of a cliff. Are they being written by AI? I hope not. Because the script of this film was just like so bad. So bad. The dialogue was bad. The story was chaotic and bad. First, let's address the dialogue. The kids didn't really speak like kids would. Like, there was such a disconnect between how kids their age would actually talk versus the words that were coming out of these actors' mouths. I feel like with the first film, there was such harmony with capturing the experience of teenagers in like 2019 with the TikTok and the dancing and all of that. And yes, in hindsight now, it seems very dated, but at that time, it was like very of the moment, and they did a really good job of capturing that culture. I don't know what happened with the second one. Like, they didn't even bother to capture any culture. It was just a regurgitation of the kinds of tropes that we saw in the 80s, you know, with these kinds of films and TV shows where a teenage kid gets bullied and he falls in love with a girl, and it was just so surface level and so basic. It was stripped of any of the individuality that the first Shazam movie established for this franchise, and it was really heartbreaking. So that's just with the depiction of the teenagers. Then we get into the superhero aspect of it all, where that storyline also floundered. I mean, we have the Daughters of Atlas. Like I said, in theory, I love incorporating Greco-Roman myth into the superhero genre. I think it works. But the Daughters of Atlas just fell so flat as villains, which is crazy considering you have Helen Mirren, Lucy Liu, and Rachel Zegler as these characters. Like, how are you wasting such talented actresses? I'll tell you how, with a terrible script. With a terrible script. It just felt like they were all there for a paycheck, which Rachel Zegler confirmed. But it didn't help that the script was just so bad. The words coming out of Lucy Liu's mouth were just baffling. It was horrible. And then the motivations of each of the characters were just so rushed. Like, they weren't very clearly defined. You got the general sense that each of the sisters had different beliefs and opinions about what should happen with the Tree of Life. Lucy Liu's character wanted to just destroy the whole world because of what happened with her father Atlas. And then you had Rachel Zegler's character, who was more in tune with humanity and became convinced of the benefits of humanity after spending literally one afternoon in an American high school where she witnessed bullying. Like, I don't... Literally, her exposure to humanity was restricted to, I'm gonna lose my voice. It was restricted to literally watching a poor disabled kid be bullied by savages, and she decided that humanity was worth saving. Whatever. And then you have Helen Mirren's character, who's like in the middle ideologically, and that's the rough sketch of the characters that we get in this script. And it's not enough. It's not enough for us to be invested in them as villains. It's just so basic and just so poor. Like, I can't believe this is the final draft of the script. This feels like the draft that you would just sketch out in a Starbucks on a napkin. And when you conceive of the idea, and then with the full expectation to flesh it out later on and go through several revisions afterwards. And then you have the third storyline, which pertains to Billy and his foster family. And I also think they dropped the ball with this. I mean, you get the rough idea that Billy is approaching 18, and so he's afraid that, you know, his foster parents are going to drop him because they won't be getting checks anymore from the government for supporting him, because he'll be legally an adult and he'll be expected to get a job and perhaps even move out. By the way, expecting an 18-year-old to move out of the house, if it's not necessary in the year 2023, in this cost of living crisis, in this global economy, yeah, that's cruel. That's literal cruelty. And again, it gave me the feeling of this script being written by someone who's so out of touch from the reality of teenagers and young people today. Because it's not as if the parents don't love Billy. Like, if it was the case where the foster parents don't love Billy, like they've been mistreating him or abusing him, and only keeping him for the checks from the government, then that would be a different issue. That's when I would expect for them to kick him out the second that he turns 18. But they genuinely love their family and they love their kids. So why would we expect them to kick Billy out of the house in this year 2023, with this global economy, with this cost of living crisis? Why would we expect that from these parents? Like, that is so bizarre. So even that storyline surrounding Billy and his foster family really fell flat. It felt like it was undercooked because you just got mentions of it sprinkled throughout the film. I think it was like 3 times that we got mention of it, and it didn't feel like it was very embedded in the film itself. Whereas in the first movie, where you had, you know, Billy's identity as a foster kid and the fact that he'd been shopped around different foster Foster homes, that was a really big part of establishing him as a character and actually allowing us to understand him. And then you get that big reveal about his mother, where she was the one that left him. Like, all this time he thought that she had been looking for him and she had lost him, but it turns out that she had wanted to get rid of him. Like that. Oh, that was just such a profound emotional arc, and it worked so well narratively. To see what's become of that storyline, honestly, is just like sad. It's such a huge shame. And then next we can talk about the character of Shazam himself, as portrayed by Zachary Levi. And honestly, I don't think Zachary Levi's performance was as good this time around either. Like, I think it's just L after L after L. And I promise you, I'm not just talking about the fact that Zachary Levi had the shenanigans outside of the film. But even in the film, it just felt like he was trying so hard to speak like the kids, you know, like he was trying so hard to put on that accent. But it wasn't consistent. So at times it kind of dropped and then it started again. Kind of sounded like the equivalent of me speaking like received pronunciation. And then occasionally being like, I'm from North London, innit? Like, I'm from not like like if I just switched up on you and you were like, Jean. That's kind of how it sounded like to me from my ears. And again, I'm not from Philadelphia, but it kind of sounded like that, where sometimes he would speak with received pronunciation, an American accent, and then he would switch over to like a cool kind of hood sounding accent to connote that he was Billy, and it was just like inconsistent and weird, like dragging out his words. But even aside from the accent, I think because the writing was so much weaker this time around, it didn't really allow for Zachary Levi's Shazam to shine as a character as much as he did in the first movie, where it felt like he was having real fun. I think that's another thing as well, is like in the first movie he was having so much fun discovering his powers and being in awe of what he could do, and it was such a shock, whereas in the second film they're trying to recapture that fun and sense of excitement and joy, but also they made him the leader of a real superhero team that has the capacity to save lives, and so he has to balance out being this very serious leader with having fun as a character and kind of capturing that same magic that he had in the first movie. And they don't quite strike that balance very well, and they try to explain it by saying that he doesn't have the wisdom of what god was it that had the wisdom, but yeah, like he's not very wise, he doesn't know what he's doing, but then in the end they say that he has wisdom in his heart, like his foster mother says he has wisdom in his heart, and I'm like, what is going on? And then he sacrifices himself, and again it's like we're dealing with two very different characters here that they weren't able to reconcile in the second film. And also another issue with Shazam in this second movie was that there was a lack of balance between Billy and Shazam overall. Zachary Levi had substantially more screen time in comparison to Asher Angel, so it didn't really feel like Billy was even present in the second movie because he spent so much time as Shazam. And again, I do think that it's a shame because, you know, I think Asher Angel brought so much to the role in the first movie because he was the one that was carrying a lot of the emotional arc surrounding Billy being a foster kid and, you know, seeking a family, a permanent family. Whereas this time around you have Zachary Levi, who's supposed to be the avatar, trying to take the place of both Billy Batson and Shazam, and it didn't quite work. And then next we have Jack Dylan Grazer's Freddie Freeman. Again, another great character that I really, really loved in the first movie that's kind of lost in this second one. Again, in the first half, they established that he's really keen and eager to be a superhero because, you know, he does have a disability, and when he does go into Shazam mode, he no longer has that, and he's able to fly and do all of these things. Whereas when he's, you know, regular old Freddie, he feels weaker. And so that's kind of what they tried to establish at the beginning there, which would have been an interesting storyline and an emotional arc to explore for the character. But then he just gets lost in this other storyline surrounding Anthea, where he falls in love with Anthea at first sight, where she spends 5 minutes all of 5 minutes in a John Hughes high school where Freddie gets bullied and she doesn't do anything. that boggled my mind. I don't understand. I don't understand anything about this love story. Like, it pisses me off on so many different levels, because they meet when he's getting bullied. Like, he's getting bullied by these despicable kids who would bully someone in general, despicable, but bully someone with a disability, oh, special place in hell. Special place in hell. And so it pisses me off that she meets him and she sees him getting bullied, like, right in front of her eyes, and does jack shit. Like, and keep in mind, we find out that she's this all-powerful demigod, right? The daughter of Atlas. So she could have done something low-key if she actually liked him. But instead, she literally just watched him get dragged around, bullied. That teacher as well, who came along and he was supposed to have helped, he didn't help. I don't know why Freddie was thanking him. That teacher did literally nothing to help. He showed up, but he didn't give the kids attention. Like, he didn't do anything. He didn't punish them, even though he knew that they were trying to bully Freddie. So, like, I don't understand what that interaction was at all. But anyways, later on, Anthea says, you know, oh, I really like you, Freddie, because you made me laugh. I'm like, he made you laugh when he was getting bullied? Like... And then there's the added fact that she's supposed to be like 6,000 years old, and they kind of make a joke of like, oh, these guys are into older women. But it's like, it's weird because they're kids. And speaking of dumb romances with demigods as well, in this film you have Shazam crushing over Wonder Woman, who ends up turning up at the end of the movie. And that's strange because in the previous film they kind of set up this idea that Mary was supposed to be his love interest, right? But I'm guessing because Mary's now an adult and he's still a child, technically, that would be icky. But again, Wonder Woman is also an adult woman who's like very, very old. So I don't understand. I don't understand. And when it comes to the rest of the foster siblings, like I said, I like the unique aspect of them being a team and of Billy having given his powers to them so that they can share in this experience. But I do think that the film struggles to balance these characters and oftentimes has to, you know, knock them out of the place so that the focus can remain on Billy and on Shazam. I mean, you have one of the siblings, you know, he is depowered very quickly, very early on, and then he just kind of hangs around, you know, and then it's revealed that he's gay, which was like a very ham-fisted, like, just like, we're doing representation, like, look, we did it, we did the representation. He's literally just like, oh, I'm gay, like, that's the truth about me. Like, I mean, it's nice, but it's just meaningless because it's just so irrelevant to the story. It's not done right. There's lots of reasons why it doesn't work. But, you know, they did the representation, I guess. So brownie points? No, I'm not giving them brownie points. I'm taking them back. And then we get to the Atlas sisters. And honestly, even though I didn't love the writing for their motivations, for the actions, what they were doing, I didn't understand any of it, or I didn't care about any of it. The sisters themselves, though, I found very compelling. And I actually think they could have been in their own film. I actually think, again, I want there to be films about Greco-Roman mythology. And I actually think the idea of having these three sisters with three ideological standpoints is actually quite clever. I just wish the execution had been better. But in terms of the performances, of the three, I think Helen Mirren absolutely stood out the most. I actually genuinely love this character. I actually genuinely loved Helen Mirren in this film. It's absolutely a paycheck for her. Like, it's a paycheck for Rachel Zegler. So it's absolutely a paycheck for Helen Mirren. But I do think she did a good job. That scene where she was reading out the letter from, what's his name, Christopher, the pen? That scene was hilarious. When she was reading out the letter and it was like word for word the nonsense that Billy had been saying, I thought that was mwah. Like, to get Helen Mirren to say that out loud, come on, you gotta love that. So yeah, I think it was great to see her in a superhero movie. She made sure to get killed off by the end, which was, you know, very intentional. But I think she, you know, gave a decent performance. She worked with the nonsense, the trash that she was given. And there were definitely moments of levity and bright spots in the film that made it almost worth it. But listen, overall, guys, Shazam 2 was, I won't even say disappointing because I didn't have high hopes. but it's just not great. Like, it's just, I was really, really bored throughout the film. I found myself wandering off and thinking about other things. Like, what am I gonna do next week? Like, what's my to-do list? What's my shopping list? Like, my mind was just off throughout this whole film. I would be grabbed back occasionally with, like I said, you know, moments of levity and fun, but overall it's just so damn forgettable and inoffensive and inconsequential, which leads me to what I wanted to discuss, which is the direction of superhero movies in general. And I'm not a, you know, fatalistic person. I'm not going to sit here and say superhero movies are dead, they're dying, they're dead, they're deceased. I don't think superhero movies are dead, okay? I don't think they're dead yet. But I do think that they're sick. I think they're not well. They're very ill at the moment. We need treatment. We need medication. Because if we want to continue to see this subgenre thrive for another 10 years, we can't continue down this Shazam 2 route. We can't continue with more Ant-Man 3s. Like, listen, you guys might enjoy... I'm trying to plead with you here. You may enjoy this film, okay? You may have had a fun time with Ant-Man 3, fun time with Shazam 2, fun time with Thor 4, but you guys can still at least see that if we continue down this path of mediocrity for these superhero films, then the comic book movie genre is not going to survive for much longer. Like, it will go the way of the dinosaurs or the way of the westerns and musicals, because at the end of the day, you know, these average, mid, very meh films aren't going to drive the same amount of box office as great films are. And in this landscape where people already have superhero fatigue, where we're already seeing so much content coming out of not just the cinemas but also streaming, we can't afford to have L after L after L like this. Like, we can't afford to be caught slipping on these streets. Not on these streets. These streets are the same streets that we used to have in 2016, okay, where the competition was lower. But instead, it just feels like these studios are just giving up and giving in to conveyor belt filmmaking. And now is actually not the time to do so. And so, guys, with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving Shazam Fury of the Gods a 5 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I talked about my thoughts on Shazam Fury of the Gods, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this movie down in the comments below. Let me know if I'm being too harsh. I can handle it. I know that you guys do not care for some negativity sometimes, but it just has to be said. We can't continue down this path, honestly. Even if you had a fun time with this one, it's not looking good overall. Think about the bigger picture. Think about the bigger picture, guys. But please be sure to subscribe to my channel to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.